Hello, everybody. Welcome to the PixelPlay Podcast. Sans Kaylan, aka Catastrophe. Hey, it's me, Adam CS Radical, here with Jin and Chris. It's a Cartridge and Quarters episode, aka a PixelPlay episode when Kaylan's not here. And you know that because he's not here, we are literally just going to talk about Weeb JRPGs for the entire show. So if anything happened in the last 7 days, they're not important. Okay, I guess fine. There's a Nintendo Direct that might have happened. But there is also JRPG content there. So you know what? We can still stay on topic. It's not actually destroying anything here. So, you know, I figured, I mean, even without the Nintendo Direct, we knew immediately when Kaylan's like, okay, I'm going to have to take this week off. We're like, all right. So now that we've been downplaying JRPGs for such a long time with Final Fantasy 16 out on the horizon, we knew exactly that this episode was just going to be, all right, so let's talk about all the completely worst Japan trash JRPGs that we have here. But for the time being, I guess we should start with the normal things. So I guess I'll ask the first and most important question of the show. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good because I've been playing a kind of JRPG, but Final Fantasy 16. That, holy crap. This game, I don't want to give away any spoilers or anything. It's tough to even talk about just because obviously it's a very story-heavy game, but the combat, like the actual action of it, is really good. I thought Final Fantasy VII's like remake was good. This is kind of like that, only a little more actiony, way better than 15 and whatever. I mean, they were kind of going with this since 13, let's be honest, maybe even 12.
Well, kind of 13, they decided to go with what we thought was going to be an interesting battle system, except we realized that it was hit button and watch.
Yeah, it was more of a management sim, if anything. But just the story, the animation in this, the epicness of things that happen, the game is so good. Apparently, according to my PS5, I'm 40% or 41% done the game because it's actually got the progress now right on the home screen. And I think I'm a little over 10 hours, maybe 11 hours. So I'm getting through it, but I have a feeling that the later half, when they start doing some more heavy stuff, quests are going to be a little bit longer. So it's,
I don't a lot more stuff to also kind of make you leave the story for a bit and do other things.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to finish this with 22 hours. That would be very confusing. Or my PlayStation is just not counting my time properly.
There is the old test. Let's see. How long to beat Final Fantasy 16? Let's see what the average is right now. Main story, 30 hours when they're rushing through, and then main plus sides is around 46. Completionist is around 60.
Okay, so I got a while to
go.
You're
probably looking around the 35 to 45 mark, most likely.
Yeah, I'll be around there. So far, I've been doing any side quests I come upon. The game is so Final Fantasy 14 sometimes, it is ridiculous. The animations, even for the side quests, the little bubbles above people's heads and everything like NPCs, it's like the same. I don't even think they changed it. And the first side quest, which is not a spoiler, because, I mean, once you hear what it is, it's like talking to a cook and delivering to 3 NPCs soup. That's it. Like, it's literally a soup delivery. It's like the easiest, just like, here's what a side quest is. This is how you do them. The animation of everything is Final Fantasy 14. Like, to pick up the soup, it was like that little glittery light that was coming off of it, just like in 14. And then going around to the NPCs and dropping off soup and everything. I was like, man, this is one of those MMO moments where they made 14, mixed it with, I guess, Game of Thrones, and then boom, here's a single player experience. Like, so good.
Yeah, so I mean, good. Again, from what I saw with the demo, I wasn't too hooked on it, but I've heard so many good things about it that it tells me that, you know, when I inevitably can get around to playing it, I'm gonna hopefully get a good run. My hope is that when I do play this game, I'm gonna get at least a couple chapters in, and getting around to the 6 to 8 hour mark, I start going, okay, no, I see where we're going. Okay, I'm in. I don't know if I'll still end up being deep into this, like I say was with the 7 remake, or even older Final Fantasies like 10, even 12, which I'm hot and cold with, but at least with 12, I felt the world was a lot more interesting. I think that's what my also issue is with 16, is that it feels like 12, except less of the fantasy part. It feels more like a grounded medieval game rather than being a Final Fantasy game, and I think that's still where my brain's kind of struggling to deal with it. I mean, sure, there are the giant summons, the Akon, but it just feels almost too real in a way, I guess.
There are parts 100% that are like that. This is a much more grounded, mature, serious tone sometimes. You definitely then have a part where it's like, all right, we have to go through this forest, and the forest is like filled with goblins and all this other stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is definitely something that's happening. This is very Final Fantasy-ish. And then the magic and crystals and all that kind of stuff. But yes, it definitely has much more of a serious tone sometimes, for sure. The fantasy element is it's toned down, and then all of a sudden it comes back, and then it's toned down, and then it's back. It's almost like it's there, but like it's not as core to the world as in the other Final Fantasies, where it's just like fantasy everywhere.
But I mean, as you said, you're about 10 hours in. You know, with your general feelings on it so far, like how are you, like if you were to put it next to a Final Fantasy game right now in terms of how much you're liking this, where would you kind of lie it at?
It's hard to say because it does feel extremely different than every other Final Fantasy. Like it doesn't feel like any like the closest I guess would be the 7 remake just because of the like more actiony elements of it. If I was to say like story-wise, I like this on the same level as I'd like Final Fantasy 9. It's like I enjoy them both the same, but they are nowhere near even close to the same as one is very childish at times and fantasy and like imagination like running wild, where this is just like epic thing happening in a much more realistic tone, minus of course magic and giant monsters and all that kind of stuff. um yeah, that's really hard to say, but I would say that like how much I enjoy the story is on the same level as 9. Even though like, which I'm not saying these games are very similar at all. I just mean my hype level for it, where I'm like, I need to play a bit more because I need to know what the heck is going on. It's like around that, I'd say.
Yeah, so you're definitely still like very much not at all disinterested. You're still ready to go full bore.
I think that this game has done a really good job of introducing a little bit, and then this major thing happens, and you're not sure why. And then it's like, well, keep playing to find out more. And then you think you find out more, and then you find out actually just something else, and you're like, wait, what? And then another big thing happens instead on the side you need to deal with, and you're dealing with that, but it's kind of hinting at what you were dealing with before. It's just the way they've told this story in a very cinematic way. It really feels like it's like an HBO show or something, like where it's like it's building up to stuff and then like an episode ends, even though it doesn't. And it's like, okay, that big thing just happened, and now I need to understand what just happened. Plus, I still need to answer what I was trying to understand before. And you just want to keep playing because you're like, but why? Why would that person do that? Or why is this happening? I have to. I know. I need to know. I need to know. And yeah, it just gets you hooked that way. And of course, the battle and everything, like the fighting, is so easy to get into, but like you can master it, and you feel like really good when you do. That it's kind of like you want to keep playing because there's nothing that gets boring at all. Not yet, at least.
My biggest concern still are the bosses still very spongy.
They are, but you do get more powerful, and the bosses and the battles, basically what'll happen is instead of just doing the same attacks over and over, you'll like get to a point where you half stagger, and then there's a move you can do when someone's half staggered. Then you can full stagger them, and then there's these other moves you can do, and they are really, really cool. And then they introduce more and more and more. So it's kind of like you're staggering quicker, you're dealing a bit more damage. It used to be where I had to stagger bigger enemies like 4 times, and I'd say now it's only like twice. Or two and a bit, like I'll stagger them twice and they'll have so little health left by the time I'm trying to stagger them for a third
So
time.
it's more like in the early stages, it's more kind of introducing you to the combat by repetition, and now that you're getting further in, you're becoming a lot more powerful. So a lot more of these enemies are a little bit easier to take down. Is there a leveling system that's also affecting that?
Yes, and I can't tell if it's leveling with you because I've gone back to areas because the map is actually surprisingly not huge. Well, okay, it is if you were to walk it, but there's tons of fast travel crystals and stuff throughout it. So you go back, and I've noticed that I'm level 22 or 23 right now, and when I go back to an area, all the enemies are like level 21. So it seems to be that enemies are leveling with me, or at least playing catch up if I do get to a certain point. but I've also not really run into a point where grinding has been a thing. I fight everything I run into, and if I see certain enemies to the left or right, like I'll make my way out to fight them. But I have no point been like, all right, for an hour, I'm just going to run back and forth and grind it out here. So I'm only like 11 hours in and I'm already level 22 and I'm not on story mode or anything like that. Excuse me. I'm on, I think it's called action focused. There's only the two different difficulties and I left it at action focused, where normally with a game, I might even just try story mode to not spend 60 hours in it just grinding out and doing the same stuff. But so far, I haven't had to grind. And if you die to a boss, you actually can just try again. It kind of keeps where their health was, and it gives you all your potions back. So I've gone into bosses where I only had one like main potion, and like normal potions 20% of your health healing. And like there's no way I'm gonna win because like again, they're kind of a sponge or whatever, the bigger bosses and stuff. And I'll die, but then all of a sudden, I took off a quarter of their health. I come back, their quarter health is still gone, but now I have 4 main potions and 3 high potions, and it's like, okay, cool, I can now beat this boss. So it's really just going into a boss with not enough potions. It's like, all right, I'm probably gonna die and have to retry, but let's see how much health I can take off until I need to continue. And the loading times are so fast that like even when you die, doesn't matter. You hit retry, you're back within 2 seconds. Like it is not a long wait by there's no loading a save, nothing. Like just
Unless
retry.
you got a 10-minute cutscene you got to rewatch.
No, it brings you right back into that boss battle right where you left off.
So it's definitely not an old school game anymore, that's for sure.
No, there's a few quality of life improvements, I would say, that are keeping this very fast moving, which is probably, again, another reason that I haven't gotten bored. Because even if I'm doing a side quest, I can do it so quick with fast travel, the loading times, everything. So it's really not that bad. Yeah. Feels a lot like Final Fantasy 14, honestly, all the side quests, every single one so far.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. Like I said, it's not been my thing from the demo, but it's given how well reviewed it is. I'm glad that, honestly, Final Fantasy, at least for a bunch of people, is back, which is all I can really ask for. And if in the end, when I do get around to it and play it, that I end up coming away with a similar feeling, then that's going to be great. If not, even then, I'll still be like, I've got a bunch of other things I can go to, like how I just finished Trails in the Sky. So I'm now on the Crossbell arc with the Azure game, so I'm now playing Trails from Zero. So I'm now almost completely caught up to all of the games. I've just got to play this 2-game arc, and then it's all done, and then I'm completely caught up on story leading up to the new game in July. Probably won't finish this arc. I don't think there's any way I can finish both of these games in that span, but it is what it is. Finishing Sky, like I've said before when I was talking about the series, it's interesting having played Cold Steel first, because I know a lot of people said, well, you got to start from the very beginning. It's almost a much more interesting experience playing it like this, because in Cold Steel, if you play through all 4 of the games, you get introduced to a bunch of characters from the previous 2 arcs that were done beforehand, and you don't really know too much about them unless you've done like the YouTube research like I did, but even then I had like a very bare bones idea of it. And now playing through Sky, it's like, oh, that's where this guy comes from. Oh, this is where this person's from. Oh, this is why this person does this. And you start connecting dots here and there. And now that story's finished, it's interesting how I went from when they introduced the main cast of Trails in the Sky in Cold Steel. I believe 3 is the first time you start seeing them. It's either 3 or 4. I can't remember. I'm just playing through 3 again now, so I'm slowly starting to remember things that happened in that game. But I looked at Estelle and Joshua, the 2 mains from Sky, and went, oh, these people are kind of cool. Like, this is pretty neat. To now that I finished the series, I'm like, I fucking love these 2. And there are also other characters that I'm like, oh my god, like, it's amazing. There's literally, like, you know how a lot of old JRPGs had that, like, one comical villain that you keep beating repeatedly throughout the series? Or throughout the game? That's literally Trails. They have one character who you start off by helping out in the first game. Slowly, after somebody goes bad that he's related to, he suddenly becomes a villain, but he's like an absolute buffoon, and you keep slowly beating him. And then I realized, like, I don't know if he shows up in the Zero or Azure game that I'm about to start going through, but he shows up later in Cold Steel as like a one-off boss fight, and you're like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, I guess he's important somehow. And now that I played Sky, I'm like, oh, it's this fucking idiot. And again, it's the things that I actually are appreciating more now that I'm going through and playing the old games, because like it really shows how much care they have in this world that they've built, in that all of these characters, like, because these games are all within like not even a 10-year spans. So they're so much intertwined in each other. So it's so interesting to see all of this all coming together and seeing how these different puzzle pieces are now fitting in. Now my brain's starting to go, oh, so this is where this slides into. There's even like scenes in the third and final game of the Sky Arc where they start like giving you clues to where things end up going in Cold Steel, which is crazy that they're already planting seeds when they don't even release these games for years after this. So like,
Yeah, that's crazy.
and it's really good. Like there's still some continuity errors. Like now that I'm playing Trails from Zero, if you really want to take it with a fine-tooth comb, all the locations aren't perfectly matching when you go to the same locations in Cold Steel. The rooms aren't completely the same anymore, but it's it's OCD stuff. Like it's not completely perfect, but you kind of accept it for what it is. But like even for example, playing the beginning of Trails from Zero now, and the music that they use in the first dungeon you walk into is the same music that plays in Trails of Cold Steel 2 when you're in that same dungeon, at a different part in the storyline. So it's interesting how some stuff still carries over. And now that I've finished one more series and now I have an entire continent story done, here I am now in the second arc of the 3 arcs that they finished, and now getting into a whole other state that's literally like right in step with Cold Steel, because what happens in these 2 games happens during Cold Steel at the same time. Because there's a point in, I believe, Cold Steel 2 where this massive magical tree shows up in this one city, and you see it from an airship in the distance, but you can't access it because it's like this big magical barrier. And having not played the Azure games, I had no idea what the hell this is. And now I know that when I go and play these 2 games, eventually it's going to come up. I know why it happens now, but now I get to see like the timeline there. I get to see certain people from Cold Steel that are there towards the end of this arc where they start dealing with this city's annexation so that they become part of the continent of this military-ridden country that we're trying to deal with in Cold Steel. So, like, this is what I'm loving about this series as a whole, in that this story that is now currently, at least North America-wise, 9 games old, technically 12 if you count Japan, because there's 3 games that they've gotten so far extra. We're going to get one hopefully in July if there's no delays, but at this point, if they haven't said anything now, I think we're fine. And then whenever these next, I don't know if the Kuro no Kiseki, which is the current series they're doing now, I don't know if that's just a 2-game slot or not. I haven't really researched much into it because it's in Japanese. I don't care. I don't want to know anything until it's coming out in English. But the idea that they're still going, and I haven't felt like, now that I've played through 2 complete arcs, and I don't feel like the writing suffered, I do feel the same things from Sky that I did in Cold Steel, where there are certain NPCs that I really like. There are certain stories that I'm like, oh, that's really cool how this actually matters and carries. And now that I'm getting into Azure and seeing more characters that I've now am starting to really enjoy, and some of the locations that, you don't even see in Cold Steel when you go to this Crossbell City, and knowing that, because it's interesting playing From Zero and then also playing Cold Steel 3 at the same time when you're in Crossbell. So there are certain locations completely locked off from you, and yet in the Trails from Zero game, I'm like, I can go there. So it's also this interesting thing of like, I wish I could go to this one place, though. I want to see what this looks like in 3D, and it's not there. So it's just such a cool thing, and I can't wait to see when the story continues on with Trails into Reverie in July. And man, like it goes into the JRPG conversation we'll have after we go through the Nintendo Direct stuff. But man, like, as much as Final Fantasy has lost its luster with me, Trails has taken that ball and run with it full speed through at least like 10 different walls of different compositions, and are just killing it right now. And I know you've been wanting to try these games for a while now, but of course your backlog of 7 million games is getting really difficult to go through. But man, I cannot wait for when you actually get a chance to take a crack at one of these and just see like how well crafted these stories are and these worlds are.
Well, I do have the first Sky game on Steam already. So technically it's in the backlog, and I would just be doing my backlog a service if I finally played that. The only issue is I have a feeling the Steam Summer Sale's in like 2 days. I have a very strong feeling I'm just going to buy the other 2 Trails in the Sky games when I see them. Like, as soon as I saw you playing them on Steam, I'm like, well, I'm buying those this summer. I can just feel it. Like, it just happened, right?
Well, at least, if you ever get to Cold Steel, since we console share, you got all 4 of those now, because I've bought all 4 of them now.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's just you just added 4 games to my backlog without even having me to do anything. I didn't even have to move, and whatever number I got it down to,
Yeah,
it just went back up.
I just haphazardly just added 300 hours to your backlog.
Yeah, I can't even think of the Yakuza series because if I think of the ones that we share, my backlog's just jumping up by another like
Look,
7.
it's the way that things that kind of work. You've been like the day one guy, and then I'm the guy that like here's this massive log of of games that you haven't gotten a chance to play yet. So whenever you want to, here's like at least 20 things you can just go take a stab at.
Yeah, because that's what my backlog needed, another log to be added to it. I did love that you mentioned that one buffoon boss or whatever. It was giving me such like Ultros from Final Fantasy VI
Yeah.
vibes, but
Or even
across
like with Chrono
multiple
Cross, what was it, the Salt and Pepper, like those two
Oh
guys?
yeah. Oh yeah, those two guys that kept showing up, and they were more like tutorials
Or
because they
what's
kept
his
giving
name
away
in
stuff.
Trigger? What's the Ozzy?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
Ozzy Slash and Flea. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a good one too. That's a really good one too. Yeah, I love when games do that, and the fact that there would be one going across multiple games that just adds so
Well, I
much.
mean, literally the villains in this series, like the odd one will die, but this entire faction called Ouroboros, which is the secret society, they carry over. So there are bosses from the first game of Trails in the Sky that you're still fighting in Cold Steel 4. It's still going. Like because these guys aren't being killed, they're still living to come back another day. So it keeps like because we're talking this continent in a few different countries altogether, these few different nations. So like it's an airship ride away, and it's there's so much more to it. So these people that you get to know, they keep coming back. So it also adds to the mystique of like finally gonna take this guy down. And you realize, nope, today is not that day.
Damn, I'm gonna start this so soon. Oh, I can feel it. I can feel the first one. If it's Steam Deck verified too, which I'm pretty sure
Oh,
it
if the
is.
summer sale pops them all up too, and you're gonna be like, shit.
Oh, there's gonna be a bundle or something. That's what's gonna hit me. Ah, it's over. Yeah, it's happening. It's happening.
Well, speaking of bundles, we had a bundle of joy in the Nintendo Direct. That's the best segue I can come up with.
That was
there.
a good segue. That was actually good.
You know, we should start with Super Mario RPG, but we shouldn't at the same time. So why don't we start with, if we put Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Super Mario RPG aside for now, what else stood out for you in the Nintendo Direct that we got? Because there was not, it wasn't just those two. I mean, those are the two big ones, but there was still some interesting stuff in there as well.
Yeah, there really was. And it's not like everything interests me, but I was very surprised at how many things that were just like remasters of really popular Nintendo games that would be probably really good for kids and stuff. Or like Pikmin 4, they showed a bunch of that. I've never been a Pikmin guy. I don't get it. Like, that doesn't interest me. But the fact that they were like also Pikmin 1 and 2 remastered on the Switch, you can buy it right now at the end of this. I was like, that is like what I want more from all game companies. Like,
yeah, like you wish
hey,
like PlayStation's thing, they were just like, oh, by the way, this, you know, oh, Metal Gear Solid 3, you know, we're gonna be remaking that, but also the Metal Gear Collection you can play right now, like stuff like that.
That's the kind of stuff, like you get that hype, and then like they would sell insane amounts of that Master Collection Volume 1 or whatever it's called if they had done that. I know I would have picked it up before even researching what consoles and everything would be on and which one do I want this on. I would have immediately run to the store and probably bought that. Like I would have 100% done that. So I do love that Nintendo does that kind of stuff, and I did see them do that. It was interesting because as they were showing, I think it was Super Mario Wonder, all of a sudden it was like, here's Luigi's Mansion, we're remaking that or remastering it or whatever.
Yeah, I think Luigi's Mansion 2 they're remastering.
Yeah, and then they're like, also, here's this new Peach game that's going to be coming. It's going to be a lot of fun. And what else did they show? There was something... And then I think that was when they also showed the Pikmin 1 and 2 or something. But
yeah, because they had another
like,
WarioWare coming out. So like there was a flurry of stuff.
Definitely. It had a lot, and it was like a lot of like Nintendo first party stuff too, which is what interests me because I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting. Usually it'd be like one and then something small, not like, hey, because they didn't even make a big deal over most of their remaster stuff. It was like, yeah, Luigi's Mansion. Yeah, okay, anyways. And Pikmin 1 and 2. But anyways, let's move on. And I was like, some directs or whatever, you'd think they would focus on that because that's all they really had. They've saved so much for the end of the Switch's life cycle. Apparently, they were like, what do we do after Tears of the Kingdom? It's like, I don't know, all this. And it's like, where was this 2 years ago? Like, why?
I also think because with this direct, I also think I'm starting to be a little more correct in my assessment that we might be seeing a much bigger trend of cozy games because there was a lot in this direct as well.
Oh
Like you
yeah,
had Fae Farm, you had I believe it was called Palia.
Talia, yeah.
There was another one that I'm blanking on right now, but I think there was at least like 3 or 4 games that had that kind of like farming or cozy simulator sort of game to vibe to it.
Yeah, like fairies farming and all that kind of stuff, like just super cozy, which I love. I am so into cozy games. Not
Most
exactly right
most of
now.
the ones they show weren't my cup of tea, mainly because the art style felt more like a mobile or like something that like would be on
Yeah,
Facebook games back in the day. So
yeah,
those didn't necessarily jive with me in the same way that like obviously a Harvest Moon or a Stardew Valley does, but or like a Story of Seasons, I guess now, so those didn't quite vibe, but like there was other cool things like what was that one? Oh, right, Myth Force, the one that kind of looked like a medieval first person shooter that kind of gave me like Void
yeah,
Bastards vibes, which is a game I reviewed
yeah.
on this podcast before. There was
That was a
also
very
the
good game.
I think it's Penny's Big Breakaway or something like that.
Oh, I don't remember that one.
It was the one where it was like this girl and a bunch of like like blue penguins were like chasing her around sort of deal. That
Right.
one
Yeah,
gave me super like that's a hidden gem potentially that could like
yeah.
that covers that like retro Sonic the Hedgehog, like Bubsies, sort of like those kind of games. Like I looked at that and went, that might actually be good, pretty good. Like it's got the potential there.
Yeah, that I do remember that one. I do remember that looking pretty cute and thinking like that is like yeah, some old school kind of vibes, but like obviously with a modern fresh coat of paint kind of
Yeah, it's
idea.
definitely got like the Sega Genesis platform, but in modern day like 3D. So
Yeah, yeah. I also there was Star Ocean 2 or whatever.
yeah, the
They were
second
doing like
story, which
another.
I need to play because I've never played that one.
Yeah, because they've got the first story or the first one, whatever that's called, on Switch. I don't know if it's on other things. I just know it's on Switch because I've had it on my wish list for a long time. And the fact that now they're doing the second one and continuing with that, I was like, damn, that's awesome that they're bringing back these. I mean, to keep on topic today, old school JRPGs and giving everybody the chance to kind of to play these
I
because
hope that ends up
they
being
look
really,
awesome.
really well done too, because it's crazy to think how long that series has been around. I've never finished a Star Ocean. I've come very close with Till the End of Time and Last Hope, but both of those just couldn't retain my interest all the way through. And like I've heard good things about the newest one. It wasn't Integrity and Unfaithful or Unfaithlessness or whatever. I don't know. It was a stupid title. But the new one, Divine Force, I believe it is.
I can't even remember.
But like I've been told before that it looks like it's not great, but it's actually pretty good. But I will never touch a Star Ocean game until it's cheap again because Star Ocean games I've found don't do what I want them to do. Star Ocean, all I want is Final Fantasy, but in space, and they don't quite hit that vibe. It's I don't know how to explain it, but like I think it's just for the same reason that I'm not too big a fan of the Tales games because that battle system is a little off. Like it feels like it's trying to be actiony, but it's still trying to retain that JRPG bit to it, and it doesn't quite mesh to me. I know you love Tales, and we'll obviously talk about that as probably one of our JRPGs that we'll mention over the course of things. But like, I hope that with this one I can take a fair shake at it because I really want to like that series because, god damn, I want a good sci-fi JRPG.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I want to get into it because I only ever played the Till the End of Time or whatever that one was called, and I never finished it. That was like one of the ones that got lost in a
It
PS2
also had a
backlog.
stupid difficulty spike in that game.
Oh, I never even made it to that part. Or I
Yeah,
did. I
there's a point where I
stopped.
believe it's some sort of either volcano or some sort of like lava dungeon that you walk into, and that was the point that I'm like, why is this suddenly so hard? And then brain kind of went, oh yeah, it's a JRPG. I don't like this battle system as much though. I don't want to grind this.
Yeah,
And then that was
yeah.
it. There was no easy mode in on that game. There was no way to get around that one.
Well, hopefully this. I'd have to look into it. Maybe the Star Ocean 1 and 2 remasters or whatever that are going to be on Switch. I wonder if they have like an easy mode or a something to make it a little more accessible now.
For sure. Other than that, do you think that the Batman trilogy is going to run well on that thing?
Okay, I think the first game probably because when you think about how old the very first one is, it's pretty old. It was running on like a PS3 and stuff like that. I know Switch can handle that one. Second game, I feel like City is where it would like be a little wonky, but they could get it running just kind of like at a lower resolution. or pretty low frame rate, or maybe they're stuttering. I don't know. I feel like maybe definitely the first one and maybe the first two. But Arkham Knight, I had to go spend back in like 2014 or 2015, like $900 to get it to run on my PC. And I know the graphics card that is currently sitting in my storage because I've obviously upgraded since then because I'm obsessed. Um, it could barely run the thing at like a stable frame rate. I don't know how it's going to run on the Switch. It's I mean I hope it does because like actually no, maybe I don't hope it does because my 900
You'll be really
card,
pissed if somehow the
yeah,
Switch runs it flawlessly on day one when you're like, I spent this goddamn much to play it on my PC and it didn't even work properly then.
yeah, and that was 2015. So you're telling me I just had to wait 2 years to finally get the product that can run freaking Arkham Knight? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, it was running on PS4, it was running on Xbox One, but that was again like 30 FPS, like 1080p. So the Switch would have to still do 30 FPS, but like it would be bumped down to maybe 720p. Anything beyond that, I have no idea how they'd get it to run because I feel like even 720p is pretty aggressive for the Switch for that kind of game. I almost feel like it'd have to be like 480p and then like AI upscaled to 1080 and it won't look great. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what
I'm
happens.
curious, but I'm probably not going to buy it for that reason. But I
Yeah.
will read the reviews.
Yeah, and now we'll get to the obviously the core of it. So Super Mario Bros. Wonder. My sense of it was 50-50. Like I looked at it and like that looks like a lot of fun. I also looked at that and went, there's gonna be a collection of Mario diehards that are gonna hate this because of what it
Oh
is.
yeah. Yeah, it is a little more like you can even see the animations are a little bit different. It's a little more goofy, it's a little more animated, whereas like normal Mario was nowhere near as much this. Um it does have a different look, a different feel. For me, I actually really like this style. This because the thing is, I know the new Super Mario games that have been out since I feel like that was back on the Wii and then continue with the Wii U and stuff. Um, I didn't like the controls of that game as much. It did feel like Mario was on ice. Like it didn't feel like he would just stop when you stopped running. There was always this bit of a slide and didn't feel like the old games to me. For some reason, this one, it feels more fluid in the animations and stuff. Now, that could just be the way it looks and it'll feel the exact same. Um, but I kind of do like the way this looks based on that it does look different than New Super Mario Brothers, which I wasn't the biggest fan of. I'd play them. I thought they were really good games, but this obviously is like a whole new take and a little bit more refreshing too, let's be honest.
Yeah, I think the two things that concern me specifically are the text boxes, which just feels very strange to me, and then the amount of like HUD elements that they have to it, like instead of just the points and one up that we see normally with things like the excellent, the goods. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that because that feels almost too mobile looking to me.
Yeah, that's true.
And
Yeah,
that's the kind that's the weird sense that I'm getting. Like it's giving me that vibe of like, oh my god, are they trying to like give us the same HUD elements that like mobile games have to, kind of cater to the more casual crowd to which I want to go, guys, it's a Mario game. Everyone knows, like you don't need to pander to this.
No, absolutely not. No.
Because
It's
like
just
to me,
very
like the weird unpredictability of these levels, that doesn't bother me at all. That stuff sounds like a good old time. And honestly, even from someone who likes watching Mario speedruns, that looks like a very interesting thing just to see people how they end up adapting to the active changes on the map too.
yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, I like that it kind of has a bit of like a jokey vibe to it a little bit too. And it's very interesting because this year you've got this Mario game coming out, like a 4-player, little bit wacky like platformer. Sonic Superstars, which just keeps like surprising me with like, oh, by the way, you can play the whole thing in like Lego mode where everything's Lego and Lego Sonic. But again, 4-player platformer. There's even another game coming out that wasn't really shown this year because more was shown last year, and it's a Disney game, but it's got that more adult look. It's this version of the Mickey Mouse cartoons that's more like for teens and stuff. Like obviously not adult. I mean, I watch it. I think it's hilarious, but it's more like the adult version. It's like the SpongeBob SquarePants crowd, not like the real young kids. And it's like again a goofy platformer that has some humor in it, and it's a 4-player. So you've got like a Mickey Mouse, a Sonic, and a Mario, and they're all kind of in the exact same genre. But I'm surprisingly interested now in all three because I feel like they are a little more, I don't want to say adult, just, I don't know, they're like hitting that sweet spot for me where it's like not too kiddish. It's obviously not too adult, but it's kind of like something I imagine I could play with, like, a teenager, somebody, we could play together and we'd both be interested in laughing at the same things and enjoying the gameplay because it's a little bit faster, a little bit like less holding your hand and that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think their goal probably with this was to try to branch out to being a little even more for everyone. Which again, that's their audience, so it makes perfect sense. It's not like we're sitting here as hardcore, gamers that have been playing for decades now, being like, "Oh yeah, we're the target market for Nintendo." We know we're not.
No. They know we'll buy Zelda or whatever it is, but they do not expect us to buy every Mario game. Maybe the 3D ones because those are a little bit harder than compared to like for kids and stuff, but definitely not the platformers. They know like that's like
They know they
parents
just re-release the old ones again, and we just buy them for $20 a pop, right?
also that. Also that.
Well, and then bringing back old ones, obviously we get to the creme de la creme. Obviously, I mean, maybe it wasn't the biggest deal for everybody, but for anybody who was playing Super Nintendo back in the day, that was something I had never anticipated because we just assumed it was done, like it was just buried and never
100%.
coming. Literally, my favorite tweet was, I can't remember who sent it, but it was literally a tweet that just said, "Oh my god, Nintendo and Square Enix, mommy and daddy, stop fighting."
And it's true because it was Gino. I don't know if it was Mallow as well, but it definitely Gino. It was causing huge issues because they were owned as characters made by Square, and Square still had the rights. But obviously, Nintendo had the rights to every other character in the game, so they must have stopped fighting. Like, I never thought this game would ever get released like this. Ever.
Well,
I would have
yeah,
never.
like I think we thought like maybe someday it gets put on something. I mean, it was put on the Super Nintendo Classic, right? So that's not surprising. But
I
like
thought
to
it'd be
see it, to see Super Mario RPG get a full-on remake is insane. Like I initially thought, okay, maybe they'll try to touch it up a little bit. No. This is full-blown remake. And
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I missed out because I didn't get to see it live because I was at work. As soon as I had a chance, I put on the trailer because I'm like, oh my god, they released it? Okay, it's probably like they've touched it up a little bit, maybe look it a little bit nicer, maybe kind of texture it up a bit so it fits for obviously 720p. And then I saw the trailer and went, oh no, this is completely from scratch. Good lord.
Yeah, and it looks insanely good. And there's like these
And with
cutscenes and
cutscenes
stuff now.
potentially, by the looks of it.
Yeah, like as you saw in the trailer for anybody watching the video, it starts off with the original game, and it shows the opening to that, and then there's this star that comes by and kind of transitions it into the new graphics. Even when I saw that game, I was like, "Oh my god, it's finally happening! They're adding it to Switch Online, like just the Super
Yeah,
Nintendo
even for
version."
just re-releasing it, we thought it was a big deal, but then to
Yeah,
see actual remake.
yeah, like I can't. I still am in shock this is even happening because if there's only a few JRPGs in my life that I've wanted to have access to so I can play them every so often, and not all of them are easily accessible. Like for a while, Chrono Trigger, for example, couldn't get it. It would be like on mobile only, and I'm like, I want to play it, but I don't want to play it on my phone. Like I want to play it normally somewhere. Hard to get. And now that's available. But I mean, Chrono Cross was one, and then finally we got a bit of a remaster there. It was even like
We don't
half-assed.
talk
Let's
about
be
that one.
honest. Yeah, we don't talk about that one. But again, that was just what I keep expecting is these games are going to get re-released. They're going to touch it up enough so it runs on the new hardware, but that's it. I never would expect like a remake. I'm as shocked as this almost as like Final Fantasy VII remake, which is shocking to my brain because one of them makes a lot of sense. Square would make so much money and it's the super popular. But this, I was like, I didn't even think Nintendo was thinking of this, let alone willing to work it out with Square to the rights and everything to remake it. And yeah, I'm still like, I can't wait. I'm buying this day one and I'm immediately playing it.
I mean, it's not without complaints. I mean, I love the fact that they're adding stuff, and I'm curious to see where that goes. Personally, I'm not a fan of the new HUD. I think it was fine as it was because it looks a little too, again, mobile to me. It looks like
Yeah.
they just stuck a mobile HUD on it. So I'm not too thrilled about that. And honestly, I don't like the new music. If I'm being completely honest, I hope they have an option to play the original tracks because I feel like now with the extra orchestration, they actually don't sound as whimsical as the games actually have. I feel like it's now too. I feel like it almost just feels off. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't come off the way that the games kind of traditionally did because with the chipset that they used back in the day, it does give a little more comical like
Yeah.
touches to it, whereas
Yeah.
using proper instruments doesn't necessarily give that. So I feel like
Oh,
with some of the
100%.
tracks, they don't feel right. Like when they played the boss battle theme, I went, "No, this isn't right. Like it shouldn't be using these instruments. Just use the same weird synth sounds that they had in the original chipset because it comes off more like this happy-go-lucky, like I said, whimsical sort of feel to it. So like those are the two
Yeah.
things that are standing out, but I think just seeing the graphical change to it is going to look so much better.
Oh yeah, the graphics I have zero issue with it. They literally took the original game and just upped the graphics. They didn't go overly realistic. They didn't try and make it look different, change the perspective. Like they left still the like weird like
Yeah, the weird
2.5
diagonal
D.
view, like
Yeah, yeah.
it hasn't
They
changed at
kept it.
all.
I love that. And you know what? Hopefully you're right because the music I do agree with that.
If
There's
they
something like
have a
fantastic.
switch you can toggle, then I almost have no problems with this game at this point.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, because if they do that, that would be genius. Because then you get, yeah, the new music and a lot of remasters and stuff do that. So hopefully this is something they add in there. Because yeah, I would definitely put that original music right back on. It has more of like this fantastical, imaginative, like kind of feel
Yeah, it
to
has like
it.
a
The
storybook sort of feel to it.
yeah, storybook. There we go. Exactly what I was thinking. And yeah, the orchestra version doesn't. Definitely, it doesn't. It's nice, but it doesn't have that same
Yeah,
feel.
it's not. It's in the same way of like, um, I don't know if if you've listened to most of the soundtrack with the Chrono Cross remaster. I honestly don't like a lot of that either. But I also think it's because they changed the instruments for certain notes, and I think
Yeah,
certain notes hit better on the instruments originally.
yeah.
So
I'm pretty sure that was
but
one where you
it's
could toggle it
probably
back.
part of that thing of my brain of going, I like the old one so much that it's hard to not like. It's like when somebody covers your favorite song, it's really hard for you to like the cover more. It's just not gonna
Oh,
happen.
for sure. Yeah. And the original songs were created, it's kind of like pixel art. They were designed for televisions and stuff back then. And the music, the chipsets were designed even for just like mono and stuff. They weren't even like it wasn't even stereo sometimes. It was designed to sound good like that. And when you try and convert that into a modern technology, it doesn't always hit the same, right? Like some pixel art now, you look at it on an LCD screen, you're like, I can't even tell what I'm looking at because you don't have those CRT lines that were naturally on TVs that helped actually the pixel art get together. Same thing's going to be with the music. So there'll definitely be ones that don't hit the same or sound right because of that reason.
Yeah, for sure. But like in all honesty, that direct was way better than I considered even possible at that point. Now again, there's a lot of like rehash stuff, a lot of DLC, a lot of Splatoon,
Oh
amiibo
yeah,
stuff, Mario Kart, like the usual fare. But for what they gave away, like the two big ones were obviously big ones. And then you still had a couple of small nice things in there. Like they did a pretty decent job for a console that we know isn't going to deliver too much because it's not like they have a lot of first party these days because that stuff comes few and far between. So all
yeah,
things considered, they did fantastic. Would I put them above Sony? Yeah. It's not that far ahead. Same with Xbox. Like they're not that far apart. But I think the reason is because Nintendo's two big ones are so huge that
yeah,
they carry so much of that rating, whereas most of the rest of that show, like I personally don't care much for. Like we said, Pikmin, not really my interest at all. You know, I don't care about Batman or Metal Gear being on there because it's on everything else. So that's not a big
yeah.
deal to me because I'm not a Switch only owner. So it's not like they did a bunch of stuff to make me go any crazier with my Switch. But Super Mario RPG Remake alone pretty much trumps almost everything we saw in the last few weeks,
Oh yeah,
except for maybe the 7 Rebirth trailer, and that
yes,
might be it.
yeah. To be honest,
And
that
honestly,
is
if I put the
probably
two
the most
together, that's a tough choice.
that is tough, and it's funny because with like if you showed like some aliens visiting Earth, like it's tough to choose between these two games. They'd be like, the hell's wrong with you? Look at this Mario game. It looks like ancient. Look at this like fantastical forest that these people are in this Final Fantasy remake one. And it's like, nah, you don't
Well,
get it.
Rebirth, I think the difference is like Rebirth, we were hyping because we knew it was coming. RPG, we're suddenly extremely hyped because we didn't know it was coming.
Yeah. How
So
they
it's
kept
kind of
that,
like which value
I
you
don't know.
taking, because I think Rebirth is going to be the better overall game,
Oh, for
but
sure.
RPG is just such an out of nowhere occurrence in the same way of like the original trailer for the Final Fantasy VII remake was, because we've been teased that forever. We had the
Yeah.
PS3 trailer for that thing a long time ago, and it never
Yeah.
came to fruition. So it's one of those things where like Super Mario RPG has been talked about for so many years that we just assume it was never happening. It's going to be like if Mega Man Legends 3 actually ever exists, we're going to lose our shit because we didn't think it was ever going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's bonkers because in this day and age, it's so rare to actually get surprised at one of these like E3 like presentations because everything leaks early. It's just like,
Yeah.
I'll scroll my news and it's like, oh, Persona 3 remake and Persona 5 tactics game. We got it spoiled the day before, and that would have been awesome to see. And it kind of like changed our
And even then,
our
like,
excitement.
we still knew like at least the 3 remake was coming, we just didn't know when. The
Yeah,
tactics
true.
game was out of left field.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, there's few games left with us personally that I think would constitute that same reaction. I think if Square suddenly dropped a new Chrono game trailer, that would break
Yes.
the a certain core of the internet.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
Like
would
that's
need
about
something
that's like the only one of the few other things I can think of that eclipsed like what RPG can do.
yeah,
Like
I would
that,
need like
I'm trying to
Square-
think of like what else could possibly be bigger a surprise
For
if
me?
it doesn't leak. Like if it just came out of
Yeah.
nowhere, how many other things could trump that?
For me, it
Like
would have
Chrono
to be
is
an
the
old
big one, and
JRPG.
I'm not sure what else might do it, but I'd have to sit down and really think about it.
I know I would want Xenogears. If there was like this remake of Xenogears that came out, and I probably would lose my shit. Like I just want to play that game again. And there's no like legal way to play that without owning the PS1 disc. Or I think you can buy it on the PS3 and the Vita, like the PS1
Yeah.
collection, I think it was back then. But that's it. Like there is no other way to just like play that. I can't even play it on my PS5, like say Legend of Dragoon. So I mean, I would love that. And if there was some sort of re-release or a remake of that,
The only two things like my personal bias could go with is like if we got a brand new Shadow Hearts game, which we're sort of
yeah.
getting if that Kickstarter comes through, the same one with the Wild Heart or the Wild Arms successor as well. I can't remember the
Yeah.
name of those two because that's so far
can't either.
past what we did. But like
Yeah.
those two are things. So like that would be one. The only other one I could think of is if we had a full on proper Breath of Fire game again, but we know that's never coming.
Oh
so.
yeah, that would be a real good one. Yeah, it's surprised. Capcom's been like really killing it lately. You'd think that they'd like all of a sudden Breath of Fire and they're gonna remake all 4 games or something in the Resident Evil engine. I don't know, but
If they
like,
remade any of them, I'd be excited, but I want to see like a modern Breath of Fire with like a new graphical chip, like bring it like obviously the style of it's already anime, so you know it's going to be very anime drawn.
mhm.
So like if you get something like that, like I think that would be a real cool drop. But like in terms of value, it's Chrono, and I don't think there's much else at this point unless it's a new Tactics game. That's about it.
Oh,
Unless it's a
Tactics
new
would
Final
be
Fantasy Tactics. And I think that's a perfect time to go into our last topic, which we're just going to gush about the best JRPGs that exist. Because, again,
Yep.
Kaylan's not here to stop us. So,
good. Which is a shame. He's such a JRPG guy now.
right?
It's his favorite genre.
So, I mean, obviously you start with the Kings, and that is Final Fantasy. I wanted to make a joke and put something else in there, but let's be honest. I mean, even though, like, for some of us, it hasn't been a king for a long time, it still is the historical king of all kings.
Absolutely.
With basically from 4 all the way to 10 for essentially 3 generations was the defining series
Yep.
for their consoles. You know,
Easily.
obviously Zelda and Mario were their own things, but in terms of RPGs, Final Fantasy and then everything else was below it. Even though people will universally say that Chrono Trigger is the best of all time, which is generally what is said along most people that are fans of those types of games, even with that in mind, we still know that at that time from Super Nintendo, PlayStation, and PlayStation 2, it was without question Final Fantasy, and anything else was a distant second.
Yeah. 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 I couldn't compete because, Even if you take Chrono, like sure, great first game, amazing game, probably my favorite game of all time. It's hard to be like, yeah, but look at this entire series of games. Like the Super Nintendo, 3 great games, PS1, 3 great games, PS2, I guess 3 great games if you it depends
And
on
you
how
could
you feel
even
about
argue that there
quality.
were weak ones there, like 5 for the Super Nintendo, 8 for PlayStation 1, and I guess 12? Because, I mean,
Yeah.
11 is its own unique thing, right, with being
Oh,
online. So,
100%.
like, but, like, if that's your weak games, they're all still very good games. I may not like them nearly as much, but it's not to say that I dislike them. Like, I've played all of these games. There are certain ones, like, I haven't finished 5, but I've finished most games that I've ever come across. It's the same reason why I'm really excited for a 9 remake, because I want the chance to go back and see if I enjoy it better now when it's much more fluid, when it has a much better feeling, like it feels more modern, because I can't go back and play it now. I tried, it didn't go very well. I didn't get very far
Mhm.
before I went, this is too old, I can't do it. Because that's the other problem
I-
too with a lot of old games, especially from different eras. Depending on the type of game they are, they're just a lot hard. Unless you absolutely adore that game to death, it's really hard
yeah.
to go back. And even with 10, I tried to go back and play the 10 2 remaster, and I still had trouble. And I fucking adore 10. So there's just sometimes where things feel too archaic.
Yeah, there's definitely things that's why I've replayed every Final Fantasy except 2 um since they started releasing on PC back in like 2013. Like 7, 8 they were on PC and then they kept adding more and more and more and I've replayed every single one. There was definitely times in each game where I was like this mechanic no longer works. Like this with modern games have ruined this mechanic because I know I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to have to switch out my party member so that they get XP. Like I just want I don't want to be Final Fantasy X. Switch in each character, do one attack, and keep doing it so everybody gets XP at the end of the battle instead of just the 3 that are there. Like that kind of stuff really bugged me. But that's why I like a lot of these remasters and stuff of these ones that are coming out, like the pixel remasters for Final Fantasy, the
Yeah, they fixed
old
a lot
ones.
of the issues, like especially with so
Yeah,
many games now, like adding things like speed, like high speed modes or things to kind of quickly run things through now, rather than having to go through the
yeah.
absolute bog that a lot of these games had.
Yeah, Pixel Remaster on PlayStation and Nintendo. They for some reason they haven't updated the PC versions yet, which is very annoying. But they've actually got like a toggle for the experience where you can just jump it up to 4 times experience, which removes basically all grinding in the game. However, you can even bring that toggle back down below 1. So for the really old school people that want that hardcore feeling, they can even make it
It's
even
almost like a
more
self-imposed
grindy.
hard mode.
Yeah, you can put it down to like half experience, and now it's going to take you twice as many battles. But there's a lot of people who just like, they're born in that era. They love that, grindy feeling, and they can do it. And then you got people like me, where it's like my backlog ain't got time. So I put it up to like 4 times, and I'll play through and just remove most of the grinding, and I will love it because I'm there for the music, the characters, and the story every single time. Because Final Fantasy killed it every game, like almost like I would say every game, the characters, the music, all of it, they'd always kill it with that stuff.
Yeah, I've said till the end of time, like I don't even. It's not even my favorite game, but I recognize that Final Fantasy VI is the best put together game I've ever played, because there is
Yeah,
nothing wrong with it. I literally cannot find a fault with it. I know people will try to go, well, there's too many characters. I'm like, but that's not a problem. You just don't use them.
yeah,
It's so simple. Like I hate that argument. Like people said that with Chrono Cross, or they'll say with Suikoden, and it's like there's too many characters. I'm like, but that's the idea, is that there's so many that you're going to gravitate to certain ones. You get to pick the ones you want. It's the same with the Trails games. Actually the third and fourth the third Cold Steel game really limits your characters, which is nice, so that you grow to like the new ones that get brought in the third game. And then
mhm,
they fill in these off missions where you get to play with some of the older people again. But like even with those games, like in Cold Steel and Trails in the Sky, like there are choices, but they all have their own strengths and weaknesses, and you just pick what's best for you, and you pick based on which characters you like, and they're all viable. It's not like, I guess the one exception for six as that example is like an Umaro kind of character, like where there's just some where they don't necessarily do anything, they're just funny
yeah,
secret characters. But like
yeah, and Grievous
Realm
time.
has her own things. Like she literally can break the game depending on which version of Final Fantasy 6 you have. Mog is an absolute beast depending on how you use him. Even Gao, like, I broke this game with Gao because all you do is you get the stray cat rage and you get the I can't remember what the item is that gives you 4 attacks.
Genji
the
glove
offering, I think it is.
Oh, the offering. That's it. Yes.
And that attack is so stupidly powerful if you do it once, and you get to do it 4 times. It's just ridiculous. I love that shit. So, like,
Oh, yeah.
but like the graphics still age well today. The music is as good as it's ever been on that system. The story is so well crafted. The villain is literally, in my opinion, the best villain I've ever seen in a JRPG.
Oh, 100%. Even to
with
this
Kefka.
day.
So, like, and it's one of those few games that they don't pull the fast one on you and be like, actually, here's the real final boss. In fact, they pull the fast one on you, and I'm sorry for, I guess, spoiling a Super Nintendo game. You think the end boss is Emperor Gestalt, and halfway in the game, that's when they pull the rug out and go, actually, it's the fucking court jester.
Yeah, it's fuck.
And he fucking kills a lot of people.
He does. That was like the Final Fantasy 16. The entire game feels like that moment when Kefka poisoned the water at Science Castle.
There are 2 specific moments. That and when he messes with the statues and the complete destruction of the continents. And you see literal children die. Fall into the abyss below.
Yeah, they weren't afraid.
Mortifying in retrospect. I don't want a remake of, like, I've seen people be like, oh, they want to remake this. Don't. I don't need to see that in full realism, please.
Do you want to cry? You're gonna cry. It's gonna hurt.
No, I won't cry. I'll be sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
But who am I kidding? I would love to see someone kill the voice acting of Kefka.
Yes, that's true. That is true. I would very much enjoy that.
But yeah, and even to this day, like, obviously Final Fantasy has been rougher around the edges, but I know a lot of people that still like it. Like, I know people that think 13 is the best. To which, cool.
I don't get those people.
I don't agree at all, but, you know, that's your opinion.
I do have a soft spot for 13 now, 13 and 13-2. I still realize what it is, but I think it's just in Final Fantasy 13 when you come out to that one big field and you can actually just kind of run around there and you can collect like little side quests and stuff. There's something about that one area and the music, because the music in 13 I think is fantastic. I love that one area and I have huge amounts of nostalgia for that, even though I don't know why I do. It's just kind of the build up to that. I'm like, all right, let's go. And then the ending, I'm like, okay, I don't really care. But this one part in the middle, I have a very big soft spot for it for some reason.
And then obviously everyone still to the end of time will be like, where's our next Tactics game? Where the fuck is it?
Yeah. Or just a re-release of Tactics so I can play it like the original.
Well, I think what everybody wants is they want Tactics to be redone similar to what Project's Triangle Strategy is.
That would be amazing. Holy shit. I would love that so much because that's what they've done. They've created, like, they did it to Tactics Ogre. They brought that back and did the exact same style. They did Octopath Traveler. That's the first one where it's like, I wonder if this works. And everyone's like, this is the greatest game. Then they did Triangle Strategy, which, let's face it, it's Tactics. It's literally just Tactics. Like, just do it, please. We'll buy it. We'll buy it. Look how well all these others sold. It's like your old school self, just in retro form.
I think they're just so busy though remaking every Final Fantasy under the sun now because 7 Remake did so well. Like, we know about the 9 Remake. Now we're hearing stories about 10 being redone. We hear stories about 6 being redone.
Oh, yeah.
No stories about 8, which is not surprising because that's an interesting game to go back and forth on. But yeah, those are the kings. Like we said, Chrono Trigger is the de facto #1 of all time, which now that I actually finished for the first time recently, yeah, I understand why people think that. It's pretty glaringly obvious why people think that.
Yeah, that one's a great game. Just that was like the dream team coming together.
I almost don't want that one remastered. Or remade, I should say.
No, I would want that one. That's probably another one where I'd want it in the Octopath Traveler kind of look. If they could do that.
You know what? My only exception is since it is an Akira Toriyama still did the designs of it. If they did it a la like a Dragon Quest graphical style, so it looks almost like Dragon Ball Z, like it actually is. I think I'd be curious to see what they do with it. But like, I still think, because that my worry would be that they would try to incorporate a different battle system, which I don't want them to do.
No, no, they would have to leave that one because that one's just too good. Where it was like one of those games where you could actually have multiple characters do one move together as long as they learned it and stuff. It was so cool because that was not really done in JRPGs before that, or at
I
least
mean, look, I'd hold
not
out
well.
if they did like a Final Fantasy VII remake level system, and then it was just instead of it being in 3D realistic looking stuff, it's in full like anime as fuck graphical designs. You know what? I'll take a fair shot at it because that sounds like a pretty cool idea. But yeah,
I know, I
like
just
Trigger and Cross both have special place in my mind. I really
oh yeah,
wish that the remaster didn't suck so bad because I want to go and play it. And
yeah,
there's
they
just
did
that part of me
fix
now
it
that
for
just
sure.
doesn't want to because I don't want to hate the game suddenly because it's not running as well as I'd like it to. But at the same time, I'm also worried that that's the game that I'm going to replay and be like, man, why did I like this so much?
I did replay it with that remaster. I had to get it on the Switch. It was before I had a Steam Deck. I was like, if I'm gonna do this, I need it like portable so I can play it on the couch because remaster seems a bit rough and I'll play it while I'm got a podcast on or something. They did release an update which made it run like a proper 60 frames per second and stuff when you're in battles and everything. It was a lot faster and a lot smoother and it became actually a good experience. But it was one of those situations where it was like 11 months after release that they finally
And it was
said,
just
"Go
disappointing as
get
a
it."
whole anyway because they really didn't do much to change it.
No,
Like it
that's
felt
just
like a
Square now.
re-release with like a computerized like remastering of it. It didn't feel genuine.
No, it's like when they released Chrono Trigger on Steam, they put the mobile version on. They didn't even update it that when you got to the first part where you put in your name, it said use the touchscreen to input your name. They didn't even change that from the mobile version when they put it on PC. And they had to go back and there was like I remember like 6 or 5 patches for Chrono Trigger where they were releasing bits at a time because there was such backlash at that game on PC. They did fix it, and now I would say honestly, Steam is the best way to play Chrono Trigger. But it was so rough in the beginning, and I regretted buying into that so early because I played it in the crappy stage where I could have waited and done it in the definitive way. Ooh,
It's
like
such a
so close.
challenge with a lot of older games too because if you just quickly recode it and put it out, a lot of people don't like it. And but if you also can't put like the 7 remake treatment to everything either. So it's that difficult decision to make of like what do you do with it? It's
Yeah,
not as simple as just, you know, oh, we'll just do what they did with 7. That's a lot of money. That
it
you
is a
can't
lot.
do that for everything. Like I know you and me would love to see a Rowdy Out of Stories remaster or remake, but we know it sure as shit isn't going to get a lot of budget for it. So
No, no. That would be a remaster where that would be easier to not fuck up. Let's be honest though, at least it's a PS2 game. Emulation software for PS2 is huge and does a really good job of just like
all right,
take
fine.
the game
You
to
know, they're going to do a
4K.
Parasite Eve one. It's you know, as much as people love Parasite Eve, it's a cult classic. They're not going to put a lot of budget behind that because it didn't prove anything to show that it can.
Also, there's no way in fuck I'm playing that. That game scared the crap out of me with like pixelated clowns imploding or whatever happening at an opera house. How the hell am I going to see that in like current gen and then like be like, yeah, sure, I'll play this. Fuck no. Like no way. It's not happening.
Yeah. So those were the original kings. We have the current kings now, which Persona is the current modern king for JRPGs. It's not even close. Persona
I am
5
ashamed to say
literally has brought more people into the JRPG life than I think any game did before it since like Final Fantasy 7 maybe.
I'm ashamed to say that I still haven't played a Persona game. Like I have to go and play 4 and 5. Those are the two that I'm looking out for.
I
I
would
was
say
always
I would
debating
say at
3,
this
but
point 5 would be the go-to because as much as I love 4, I tried to replay it recently with Persona 4 Golden. It has not aged quite as well with its dungeon system because it's very
okay.
formulaic and it can get very very repetitive very quickly. 5 I find does a much better job of it. And especially with 5 Royal now, which again you can just bum off me on PlayStation, it's definitely the best way to play that series. I think that's really the best way. I'm curious to see what they do with the 3 remake now because the 4 dungeons are really repetitive. 3 is literally one dungeon that just has new floors, so it just antes up.
Oh,
But like
okay.
4 has different dungeons with different themes. Three's theme does not change. There is only one theme. So it'll be curious to see what they do with that. But like without question, like they brought JRPGs into a different life because Final Fantasy was growing thin, especially in the PS3, Xbox 360 era. It was dead. It was dead. And on the PS2, when everybody else was done making JRPGs, Atlas was like, we've got the two best ones in years coming out on this console before we go into PS3 with Persona 5. So they've done a fantastic job of that. I think also it's created, like, I know a lot of people will give it flack because, again, like a lot of games these days, it's a waifu simulator. Let's not kid ourselves. Half of that game is literally waifu bait. I understand why some people don't like that. But it really did bring JRPGs into the modern age with a much more artistic flair to it, much more realistic stories because they touch subjects that are much more serious, much more relatable, things that most games wouldn't touch, like homosexuality and transsexual themes and suicide and things of that nature, where there's a lot more stuff that, might get talked about in more like modern Western games, but definitely not in Japanese RPGs because they tend to be more on the whimsical, fantastical side.
Yeah.
And then obviously my personal bias, the Trails games are, in my opinion, the best series that I hope as it continues forward that gets more and more attention. I don't know if it'll get the Persona level. I don't think it has that power because I think the idea of fans having to play at this point, once Reverie comes out, 10 games to get the whole story is a bit of a mountain. But in the same way of like how, there are people that when they want to see some of the bigger animes, people tell them to go to Naruto or One Piece or things like that. Those who do take the deep dive will appreciate it more for it. And obviously, at some point, you will get to experience that, maybe one day.
Well, I plan on starting the first one soon. I've said that probably for the last 2 years, but I do mean it.
But aside from that, like, there are lots of classics we could talk. We already mentioned Breath of Fire, which, that was a big one back in the day. Dragon Quest is always the de facto classic ones, especially if you're out in Japan, because that's literally their Final Fantasy. It's crazy. Like, we think that Final Fantasy is the biggest JRPG. In Japan, it's pretty big, but Dragon Quest is still way higher than it.
Yeah, it's huge there.
They have a theme park.
Yeah, and like their own directs and stuff. Like Square used to have a direct at E3, and they slowly were like, it's not worth it. But somehow there's still like the Dragon Quest direct that gets aired out of Japan every year, and there's like a Dragon Quest Day and all this other stuff. Like, it's insane. It is insane, the love of Dragon Quest. I like it. I don't get me wrong. I loved Dragon Quest 11. I thought it was like a true modern RPG, a true retro JRPG with a modern coat of paint, and I loved that.
I wish that game had an easy difficulty just because there was a point where I'm like, guys, I get it. I know this is old school. Please don't make me grind the same battles for 10 levels. Please don't make me do this. Or at least give me a high-speed mode.
I gave my controller to my nephew who was like 4 at the time, and I taught him how to do battles, and I left him in one area, and he would come
cheating.
over. It was cheating.
Also, where's my Game Shark? Can we get those back too?
Yeah.
Can I just turn the code on that makes like the next battle give me 10,000 XP or something?
Yeah, my nephew was my Game Shark. Yeah, I swear to God, he played like 15 hours total of just battling. And I just taught him how to attack, and he just did it over and over and over. And I think it was he either healed after the battle or if you touched a save point or something. And I taught him how to do that. So he just ran around and he did like 1 hour a day for like many weeks. God, that was so helpful. I was a god in the game for a while because of him. Yeah, that's the trick, everybody. That's the trick to JRPGs.
Other classics, obviously Earthbound. That's a big one for people, and one that they also wish would get sort of a remake treatment, because I think that would be a very interesting art style to recreate. Yes, almost like a Saturday morning cartoon style.
Yeah, and it does touch on big topics and stuff too in that game. Really, really cool. Yeah, that's a good one. I love the Phantasy Star.
We haven't even gotten all of them in English still. I don't think we've still gotten Mother 3 officially in English.
No, I don't.
There are fan translations, but I don't think we ever got an official release.
No, not for the third one. Just the first 2. Yeah. Yeah, Phantasy Star for me was a huge one. I played 1, 2, and 3 this year of those. That, like, I had never played 1 and 2, so all of a sudden all the things I knew in 4 became so much bigger and more important as I
Hmm.
played through 1 and 2 with all those references.
And it's
I
also so
couldn't
much
believe
more
it.
frustrating when it's like, I get why they've stuck to online because it's working for them, especially in Japan. My
Yeah.
God, though, why can't we get a Phantasy Star 5?
Yeah, like you could just do it. Connect it to the other games and it would be it'd be like a new Breath of Fire. It
Like,
would
obviously, I
blow
want a
the world.
4 remake as well, but I think it probably makes more sense for Sega to just to make a brand new one.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Obviously, we
Mm,
mentioned Super Mario at the top, which flies perfectly in sync with Paper Mario, which was sort of the successor to those games.
yeah. Yeah, and then the Mario and Luigi
The Superstar
Superstar,
Saga,
whatever.
yep.
Yeah. Those ones kind of
I
took
never
over from
played
there too.
those. I only played the original Paper Mario, which I liked a lot. And then
Yeah.
I never owned a GameCube, and by the time that like, I think it was Thousand Year Door that was for the Wii.
Yeah.
Like by that point, I'd already like phased out of my Wii because I now had a 360, so I was going nuts with that. Because
Yeah.
Mass Effect came along, and I went, "Oh, those are the RPGs I like now." And I drifted completely away from Japanese RPGs for all because, again, on the 360 in that era, most JRPGs fucking sucked. They
Oh yeah.
sucked. Like
Yeah.
Blue Dragon, Eternal Sonata. Like
Blue
I
Dragon.
like they're all like interesting games, like Lost Odyssey. Like they're all curious games, but none of them hit. Final Fantasy 13 did not hit. Persona did not have anything else after like it took forever for 5 to come out. So there was a big
Yeah.
gap in between there. Like it was just dead for
Yeah.
JRPGs.
I'd say the only one that you just mentioned that I liked was Eternal Sonata, and I feel like I liked that for two reasons. I liked the actual story and the way it connected to like the real world a bit, but I think it was also just such a lull in actual like Japanese RPGs that I was like dying for one. So that probably hit
Yeah.
so hard because it was like the one and only option I had.
Cause like the big name ones that were around at that time was like Tales of Zestiria and Tales of Vesperia. Like
That's true.
those were like the big ones because after that there wasn't a lot. Like
No,
even at the time like Xenoblade hadn't even really made its way out yet. So like
no,
that still wasn't quite there. So there was just
yeah,
that dead period. So like man, it's brutal.
yeah,
So
it
maybe I
was
should have
brutal.
tried Paper Mario, but at that point I guess I was so moved into the Western stuff with Dragon Age and Mass Effect that it's just like, nope, I'm busy. Sorry.
Busy. I'm busy. Yeah. Yeah, I do love the Tales games, but I got into them like almost after the PS3 was even done. I got Tales of Grace's F, and that was my first Tales of game. I platinum that game, which is ridiculous. Don't ever try and platinum a Tales of game. It makes you play through it 3 times, and you have to, oh my God, you have to like master every art, which every character has. It was insane. Like it took me 220 hours or something when I saw on my PS3. It was like my highest played game. But again, probably I was just dying so hard for a JRPG that I just sunk my teeth in that hard for that. Because I did really like the story, the characters, the music, all that kind of stuff. So,
And
but
I
yeah,
really
like,
tried so hard to like that series. Like it's a big one for a lot of people, but Tales was just never clicked. I think it's just the battle system, but like the stories haven't clicked at all. Like I really like the Susteria anime that came out. Like that was actually a really well like graphically that anime is one of the best looking animes at that time. It was
mm,
incredible cuz UFO Table were the ones who did it and their animation is fucking phenomenal. So that was
yeah.
cool. But like I've played Fantasia a little bit. It's okay. I've played Legendia on the PS2 a little bit. It was okay. I think the only reason I was attached to it at all was because Tara Strong was one of the characters in there, and I still was on a Riku binge at that point. But like those games have never hit. There's a lot of series that like have passed me by just because they haven't hit. Like Golden Sun never hit to me. Star Ocean never hit to me. Um Xenosaga I tried really hard to like, didn't click either. I think I
Oh, that was
finished the
fun.
first one, but like I didn't love it.
I loved the first one, and then I was one of the people when Xenosaga 2 got released. Like they changed the art style of
Yeah,
everybody.
they
They made
went
them
more
more
realistic.
realistic, and I was so pissed. I was like, "What the hell? You had a perfect game with the first art style. Just make more story and keep the exact same animations. Why do you have to change everybody?" Oh, and I think they changed again a bit for the third one and went like a little more halfway. And I was like, "Oh, come on!" Like.
Well, it's funny because they probably did it to waifu bait more, and it's like, guys, actually, the original style in Xenosaga 1 was going to waifu bait better than that.
100% it did, at least for me.
Cosmos was a fucking sex god in with that game.
Yeah, terrifying also. When her eyes turned red, that was not good.
Yeah, but that's a kink to people. That's not going to phase them at all.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that would be. Not for me. I was terrified.
So, what is there any like sleeper gems that you can think of that you've played that you're like kind of flew under the radar compared to some of the big ones?
From back in the day, gosh, no, I think that we've kind of covered all of them. I mean, I have to always give a shout out for Final Fantasy Mystic Quest because it was actually the JRPG that got me into JRPGs. My friend was playing Final Fantasy IV at his house. I saw it. I loved it. I had no idea what a JRPG was. I hadn't tried any kind of RPG before. So I went to GameStop and they actually had Mystic Quest with a second controller for Super Nintendo. No idea why it was bundled together. And I think a guide or a magazine too. And it was like $5 or $10 for the three things bundled. Because obviously Mystic Quest didn't sell like crazy and they were probably just trying to get rid of it. And I bought it and I played it almost thinking it was the game my friend was playing. I realized after a bit, I'm like, this is different. This isn't the same thing. But I like fell in love with the concept of that game, which is then what got me to actually go and get 4, then get 6, then get 7, and like continue just down my JRPG path for forever so far, actually. So yeah, I've always got to give that one a shout out. But no, I think we've kind of covered all of the ones that I really played because there was like the Phantasy Star on Genesis, but then you get the Super Mario RPGs, the Breath of the Fires that I played. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like I would
there's a lot of like other ones that we haven't mentioned. Like obviously the Mana series with Secret of Mana, which was a big one.
Yeah,
a lot of people played that. Like Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore, Seiken Densetsu 3, which eventually became I think Legend of Mana when it finally got re-released, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Obviously Suikoden. You know, I've played 3, 4, and 5. 3 not as much, but I have it sitting on there in PlayStation. But again, that's also getting me to turn on my PlayStation 2, which is difficult to do these days. There's also like sleeper hits like Mega Man X Command Mission on PlayStation 2, which was just like one that came out of nowhere that you didn't expect to be decent. Isn't there a Sonic RPG on like DS?
It's just like called like Dark Brotherhood or something.
Something
yeah,
like
I never
that.
played it. I was so excited when that got announced because like Super Mario RPG, but Sonic, and I don't think it did as well, and I never did pick it up, unfortunately.
I mean, if you really want to go deep, there was like the Dragon Ball Z like RPGs they had. I wish that it got released in America here, but there was a Sailor Moon JRPG that just never got released out here. It's been fan translated, and it's interesting.
Yeah,
like it's curious. Yeah. There's even like I remember I think it was Chamber of Secrets was the one I played, but there was a Harry Potter sort of JRPG play game that I had on Game Boy Color. That was interesting.
Yeah. There wasn't many JRPGs on Game Boy. I remember I had like a Final Fantasy Legends one.
Yeah, you would have like the Legends, which weirdly enough were called like I think one of the Legends game was called Mystic Quest in Europe, which is confusing because again, Squaresoft loves how they name things.
Yeah, it was a very confusing time. Yeah, when it comes
to
those...
that, like Xenogears, obviously you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
I mentioned Shadow Hearts, Legend of Dragoon, which I think we briefly talked about when it came to remakes.
Briefly. Yeah.
There's also smaller ones like Wild Arms, Skies of Arcadia, the E
Skies
series.
One, yeah.
So like there's a lot of small stuff. The other thing that is interesting today is that we're suddenly seeing this influx of indie JRPGs that are suddenly taking things to either a different direction or they're taking the old school ideas and making them more modern. We look at games like Crosscode and Chained Echoes and soon Sea of Stars, which is coming out in August, I believe.
Yeah, August.
And, you know, obviously we have other things that have kind of taken that formula. Like we have the tactics formula when you have games like Into the Breach that kind of mess with that and do interesting things. So like there's so many games out there from different walks of life. Like now the indie scene is full of them too because they recognize that there's such a hole missing because, well, let's be honest, Final Fantasy isn't making a tactics game anymore, or Square isn't making a tactics game anymore. So other people are like, well, we'll just do that.
Yeah. Well, Square is not under Final Fantasy at all. They've decided it's like triangle strategy and tactics ogre going forward and refuse to give it Final Fantasy.
And like, even with like old school JRPGs, like the amount of, like, obviously there's a lot of like shovelware RPG Maker looking stuff, But like I said,
Yeah.
there are gems like Chained Echoes where it's like, holy shit. And that was made
Yeah.
by that. The other impressive thing is that was made by one guy, which
That's
is
insane to me.
insane.
Yeah, because that game was spot on. I 100%ed that on Game Pass, and holy crap, that game brought back like all of the JRPG-ness of my childhood into one amazing modern game.
It,
I
it
loved it.
really shows that you know, for a guy who loves JRPGs so much, Kaylan really needs to play a lot of these.
We will build him a list. Gosh, he's got a lot of work to do, but it'll be
We
worth it.
originally had the idea of like doing a list from like breaking them into like ones that are okay to then slowly building down to the really really like overly Japanese stuff. That
Yeah.
was too much work. I genuinely thought about it for about 5 minutes and then went, I am not doing that much research. We do not have enough viewers for that level of work ethic yet.
No, no. I figure at this one, after this, we'll show him Final Fantasy VII Remake. Maybe he'll play that. I feel like it was a PlayStation Plus or something. Like he's got access to it, so I'm
Yeah.
sure he'll be able to try that one, and maybe he'll be like, "Oh, this also isn't so bad." We'll see.
But at this point, like, it's great because, like I said, there was a good 5 year period where the genre was just done. Like, it just felt like it was gone.
Yeah,
There just wasn't that hype for it anymore. I mean, obviously there was hype when Final Fantasy 13 got initially announced, but a lot of people didn't take to it very well because of the way the battle system was. Especially here in the West, we really didn't take to lightning and snow very well.
yeah,
Obviously, Japan has other thoughts. They think Lightning is like one of the best characters in Final Fantasy history, which is fucking wild to me. So there
Yeah,
must
that
be
makes
something
no.
about the Japanese voice actress with that character that must have been so much different.
Yeah. I mean, they love their pink hair. Maybe it's just pink hair.
Who
I
knows?
guess.
But
I
like
don't know.
it's been great that we had like the golden era in the Super Nintendo and PlayStation and like early parts of PlayStation 2. And now as we got into the tail end of PS4 and now we're into this current generation that it's definitely been revitalized. Persona, Trails, Final Fantasy sort of back now because of the remake 16. While it may not be like the Final Fantasy of old, it still is a Final Fantasy game that is getting good credit again. And obviously, like we said, with games like Chained Echoes, Crosscode, and more from the indie side that are also taking the old school and making it new school again, it's such a fresh genre again, and it feels like it's back. You know,
Yeah.
the stories are good again. The music is, I mean, the music has always been great, but it feels like we're getting these really good soundtracks again. Graphically, they look fantastic, and we're getting combat that actually feels right and doesn't feel archaic anymore, which was a lot of problems with JRPGs for a good period of time where they felt like they weren't aging with the times anymore. They were
Yeah.
slowly going back to the bygone era that was now past.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely been good changes like Chained Echoes. I remember playing that and it felt really good throughout the whole thing. If I went back and played like Final Fantasy 1 on the NES, I don't think I'd make it through one battle. I'd be like, I played way too much more modern stuff to be okay with this. The graphics, everything fine, but just the actual battle itself and just how the menu system in the battles work and the difficulty spike and everything, like I don't think I'd be able to do it.
Yeah,
So,
for
Gay
sure.
Pixel Remaster.
So it's great, and to have like I've been playing JRPGs for a while now again, which is going back and playing like the old libraries, playing all of these Trails games now, going back and playing Persona. I've played through Final Fantasy 12 again and finally finished that for the first time. I played Chrono Trigger and finished it for the first time. I played Breath of Fire 1 and 2, Phantasy Star 4, like going back and seeing the best of the old and now seeing the best of the new. It's great to see that back, and it only leads to more things because I mean Yakuza has their own thing going on now, so you have that too. There's just so much out there, and it's great to see because to me, in my honest opinion, it's the best genre that exists in gaming because
Oh,
it is
same.
the best vessel for story. And to me,
Yeah.
that's the best part about gaming is telling a well-crafted story. Not every JRPG is going to tell a succinct one. They're always a little out there, but there are always those parts that just seep within your soul and stay there.
Absolutely. Yeah. God, love JRPGs. Love them.
And with that being said, we'll obviously pass it on to you. If you have the ability to comment, if it's on YouTube or I don't know which areas in terms of the podcast realm, we'll let you in the audio format comment. But hey, if you want to talk about your favorite JRPGs, your favorite moments, your favorite games, your favorite characters, do that below. If you're watching on YouTube, obviously the comment section is for that. You obviously can tweet that stuff to us or on Instagram. All that information at linktree/pixelplaypodcast. That's linktr.ee/pixelplaypodcast, where you can get links to our socials, link to wherever you can find your podcast, link to our YouTube, link to our Discord where you can come there and tell Kaylan all of the JRPGs he needs to be playing. We need people to Sherpa him into the JRPG genre. That's what we should call it. We're Sherpas. Yeah, Sherpas. That's what we are.
That's what we're doing.
We're
bringing him in.
That's going to do it for this episode. Obviously, we'll be back in full force again next week, where we will probably bully him to more JRPGs. That'll probably be how we start the show off, knowing us. He'll try really hard to prevent it, but we won't stop it. Or no, we will stop him. What am I saying? Look, you talk for over an hour. Sometimes you just can't speak anymore, you know?
Yeah, I do.
We try our best. But anyways, everyone, thank you so much for checking out this episode. Again, what was your favorite RPG, favorite moments, favorite games, favorite characters, all that stuff? If you can comment that below, do that. We'll keep up with you there. Otherwise, have yourselves a good rest of your day, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you may be. And we will see you on the next episode, posted every Wednesday, noon Eastern. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye for now.